I'm going to have, this is a first aid kit. Now I'm going to carry a dedicated, very extensive first aid kit always in all my vehicles. This is a supplement to that. This is just a mini one, and you might want to consider that. It depends on what your training is, how much you want to do. But in your mini kit, you want to deal with traumas. So I'm not talking Band-Aids and stuff. I'm talking about tourniquets, combat gauze, quick clot, that sort of thing for someone that if you don't stop the bleeding, they're going to die type of thing. And I do have room in here, so I throw a couple extra things. Cell phones are important. Cell phones are an important form of communication to us, to navigation, to keeping in touch with loved ones. And if the battery dies, do you have all the phone numbers remembered on for your family members? I have inside here, I've got them all written down. You know, my parents, Mrs. W's parents, because if the phone gets lost or dies, I don't know those numbers. I haven't committed them to memory because the cell phones have made us lazy. So what I have in here is a backup battery. This is going to be a USB charger with a dedicated phone cable for whatever phone you use. So if it's an Android, of course, go with a mini USB, or if it's a Apple, go with the Lightning cable. I'm going to keep also in here a compass, because I do keep a map and gazetteer in the vehicle, not in this kit, but it's always in the vehicle. So if I did need to head to a particular direction to get to a main highway or road, at least I could keep going in that direction. Do not count on your phones. Can't count on your phones. I have a chem light in here. I've got earplugs, trauma shears, 50 feet of paracord, and a good flashlight. Turn the battery around backwards so the switch doesn't inadvertently get clicked, and you have a dead battery, and throw an extra battery in there for whatever you have. AA would be preferential. So that's that kit right there. That all fits, kind of fits in there. Okay, so here I'm going to have, this is 100 feet of rope. Some of these things are expensive to buy, and you don't necessarily want to buy them 4 or 5 times for all your different kits. This, of course, you've seen before. This is going to be a 100-foot retrieval kit, a rope kit that I use on my dirt bike. But in the winter time, dirt biking's pretty much over, and so some of those things come out of that kit and they go into this one. You just have to keep track of it and get in a habit of putting your kits together as the seasons change, and it shouldn't be a problem. So in here, of course, you've seen it, is 100 foot of climbing quality rope. The small one is at the 5 millimeter. This stuff right there with the beaners and the retrieval stuff. So you could do a lot with that. And that goes nicely in there. Okay, so in the bottom, I'm going to have 2. This is going to be for more retrieval. I'm going to have 2 of the Shackles. I always get these mixed up. Shackles, what's the other one I get mixed up with? Well, these guys right here. Now, it is very hard if you haven't done it already. I mean, it's one thing to pull a guy out with a Jeep that has great big hooks on the front, or a hitch receiver on the back you can hook to, but those guys are typically pretty savvy, and you don't often see them in the ditch. It's more the passenger cars, folks that maybe not used to driving in those conditions, that you're going to find. And it is very, very difficult to find anything to hook onto that won't destroy the vehicle. One thing that really works good that you can look for, especially on the imports, is they're going to have tie-down hooks for transportation on the ships. And a lot of the European cars are going to have a little small body panel that you can remove, and somewhere in the vehicle they will have a screw-in forged, eyelet that you can hook onto, and you're pretty safe to tow out with. So having 2 of these is really good. Now, if you guys are the hitch type of guy and you don't always carry your hitches around on the back, make sure in this kit you throw in the receiver pin. Because if you put the receiver pin in, at least then you can hook this over a tow loop like this, and you can pull from it. But usually with these, I've never found a vehicle that I couldn't get underneath there and get it into something and get people pulled out. So one for each side. If you do have a big hook on your vehicle, you can maybe just take one, but they don't take up very much space and they're not very expensive. So a couple of those are nice. I'm also going to have a couple of these guys. These are just wire coat hangers. I've unlocked, I'll bet, a dozen people's cars, or got the keys out, or figured out a way to punch the unlock button with these. And you're going to want 2, because the guy you're helping will think that he can do it better, and he's going to get fidgety. So you give him his own, then you get your own on the other side, and between the 2 of you, typically you can hook onto a set of keys or push a door lock or a window down and get things open. And you have wire for repairing things if you need to Well, we don't need to go into all that. It's pretty self-explanatory. Also, we're going to have a good tow rope. This is just a very heavy duty. It's a 20-footer. It's got the big loops in it, and that's why you need those shackles, right? Clevises, shackles, clevises. I never remember. And then finally, not finally, but almost finally, I would recommend you carry a shovel. Now, there's 3 different options I'd probably recommend. I'm not in the mud. I'm not going to be taking my van in the mud. If I do, I'm going to be taking certainly different precautions. I want a big shovel. Mostly it's going to be in the snow. And you can typically get folks out of the snow by digging a little bit. But it really is a drag digging snow by hand. So having a cheap, like an avalanche shovel that breaks down is super nice. This one here is not totally intended on breaking down, it doesn't break down. But if I take that one Phillips screw out of there, I can put it back together very quickly, and by taking it apart, I can store it easily in here. And you might want to consider getting one with a telescoping handle. Most of them are going to be that way, especially the avalanche shovels. Then you can get a purchase on it and get a hold. But you can get underneath that vehicle. Usually they will get high centered on stuff, and you can crawl underneath there, throw a little cat litter down, and scrape out the snow around the differential, and you're usually really good to go. The final thing you're going to want to consider is jumper cables. Now, if you just get the little light duty, kind of the homeowner version of jumper cables, they will fit in this kit. I don't like those. I don't want to sit and wait 45 minutes for a battery to charge with those teeny tiny cables. I like to get people on the road and get myself on the road and go. So I use the big 25-foot wrecker cables. The same thing that the tow truck guys use, and I keep them in the separate bag. I mean, they're so big that they almost need their own box, but it's what I've always carried, and I like them. And they're actually long enough because you can't count on going battery to battery, front to front. And new vehicles are always different now. Sometimes the batteries, like in my Transit, are underneath the seat on the passenger side, or sometimes they're in the back. They're all over the place. And it may be that you can only get back to front or front to back, and you have to go the full length to get to the vehicle. So the only option is taking the battery out and moving it over and charging it and then putting it back in. And that's provided you have the tools to do it. So I would recommend, if you want to be a seriously prepared person, to make the investment in a good pair of jumper cables and make sure that they're at least 20 feet long. 25, 24 is even better, right there. Now the last thing, and I know it's going to be come up if I don't mention it, is water. Right? Can't live with that very long without water, right? After exposure, water is the most, or shelter, or keeping yourself warm, water is the most important thing to get. Yeah, but if you put water in your vehicle survival kit and you live in a cold environment, it's going to freeze, it's going to split its container, and then it's going to melt and get all over your stuff and spoil your whole kit. So water is kind of a separate deal. It's something that takes some discipline to remember to put in and to take out. If you have to absolutely keep water in a vehicle, it's going to freeze. One thing you can do, it's not foolproof, but you can get these flexible type of bags like this and fill them half full. They'll expand enough, typically, where the water, as the ice expands, it will not burst the seams of the bag. Now, if you fill it all the way full, like this one is here, yes, of course, it's going to split and it's going to ruin your bag. But if you really need to do it, that's one way of doing it. You're going to have to sort that out on your own. But I look at water as being kind of a separate entity. So that's my vehicle emergency kit. You'll probably notice that there is there's no tools in this. For me, it's kind of a different thing. Now, I have a complete toolbox that I've put together, and this was my granddad. He did this. When we would go hunting and go out of town, he had kits very similar to this, and he carried tools. And back then, vehicles weren't as reliable. And so you have to, I guess, take that into consideration. If you're driving a 1977 Ford F-250, and you're probably the type of guy that knows the problems of that vehicle and what the shortcomings are, and you're going to want to have electronic ignition, a spare, and maybe some belts and that sort of thing, you have those things ready. But for those of us that are driving 2017, 18 new vehicles, the chance of something going wrong is really, really thin. And the chance of you being able to fix it or diagnose it if something does go wrong is even less. So you got to consider that. If I was, as I said, if I was taking that 77 Ford, yeah, I'd have lots of things. I'd have extra this and I'd have extra oil and that sort of thing. But with newer vehicles, not so much. Also, your personal items. We have completely separate kits, individual for our family. Every family member has got one, which is just a modest backpack that's going to have a few things in it. We call it a get-home bag. So if there was an earthquake in this area or a bridge was out and we needed to take, it took us 24 hours to get home, and maybe I was in Portland and there was an earthquake or a natural disaster and the roads were shut down, I could grab that pack. I've got a good sturdy set of shoes in there. I've got weather appropriate clothing. I've got enough food to get me by a day or two, and I can start walking. Now you can cover a lot of ground on your feet, but if you're wearing your flip-flops and you've got shorts or something on and it's the middle of winter, you're not going to go very far. So consider that and think about it. So that's a very separate kit. So for me, I mean, it really, for vehicle kits, it kind of breaks down as three. This is the catch-all. This is the main one I'm going to put in. And then if we're going to go a long ways, you know, I'll throw in the backpack, you know, personal protection items and a little bit of extra cash and that sort of thing. So this is just so you're clear on kind of what this is. So if you're interested in seeing the other kits, let me know in the comments, and we can show you those too. A lot of thoughts went into that, and I hope this is helpful. And you know, I guess for me, why some people might think this is overkill, but I think part of modern homesteading and part of being a man and a husband is being prepared and not putting the burden of getting you out of trouble on emergency services or the kindness of strangers. That's all wonderful, and that's a good thing to have, but we want to be self-sufficient as possible. I mean, you want to take care of your family, and that's a big part of it. And if you have an emergency, and I mean, to me, you know, I know this is an old-fashioned and maybe an outdated way of looking at things, but I think I love masculinity. I love being a man, and I've never considered myself to be superior or better than a woman, but that's what I am, and I enjoy that. And part of that is being prepared and being able to solve problems and to take care of folks. It's just in my nature. I guess that's what kind of is the draw for folks that, or why some folks are drawn into emergency services, first responders and police and stuff. And I don't like to not be prepared, and I don't like in front of my wife and in front of my children to have to have some other man come and save the day or get me out of trouble because I am not capable of doing something. There's going to be situations you're not going to be able to cover for all of it, but with a little bit of thought and preparation and putting something like this together, I think it's the measure of the man. I think it's a responsibility of a husband and a father, and I think that when you're able to do these things, you earn the respect of your family, especially our women. They may not say it, maybe not say it to our faces, but I think women think less of men that are not able to look after themselves and look after their families and solve and take care of problems. So if you weren't raised with family or a husband or a dad or grandparents or strong men that taught you these things, you know, I'm sorry. You know, life is not fair. But with the YouTube and with videos that are available like this and all of the information that's at your fingertips, you have no excuse not to learn these things and I guess take the bull by the horns and get yourself up to speed. That's why we put these videos up and why we share them, so that we can learn from one another. So, yeah. So if you want your women to, well, I think we covered that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.